start with the pledge. Mr. Mottola, you're closest. Thank you.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, welcome. Mr. Flynn is traveling, as is Mr. DeWitt. The rest of the board members are either on their way or with us. So if we could begin, Mr. Vehi, we have 4 items on the agenda tonight. The first is to review the current status of the town's pension and OPEB funds, then review the Board of Ed's Quarter 3 fiscal year 18 financial position and the town's Quarter 3 fiscal year 18 financial position, and then we'll hear an update on the pile. So,
God bless you.
bless you. Welcome, Brian.
Nice to be here. So I'm looking at the overall pension March 31st report. On the first page, you can see that the pension was essentially flat for March and sits at about $387 million. And as far as distribution across the asset classes, it's pretty much right on. I mean, we're not really underweight or overweight anything significantly. Equity was up a little bit because of the run that it had at the end of last year and some movement that we had to do some fundings. If you look at the returns on the last page, for fiscal year to date, we're about 7.4%, which is good since our assumed return is 7%. We're exceeding our internal benchmark. And I know, so this is as of March 31st, I know with month of April we were up a little bit. So it's been good. It's been a good fiscal year. And then you can see the 7-year, 5-year, 3-year returns there. Are there any questions on the overall pension?
It's nice to see we're ahead of the discount rate, 7%.
That's, well, we're supposed to oscillate around it. So I guess that's what we're doing.
The only question would be on the first page on domestic equity with that loss. Is that a loss that shows for the past month, 2 million? Am I reading that right?
No, so the investment up and down is the investment return. So the net new investment means that we had flows essentially, and it looks like $2 million. Was that for? Yeah, that was the fund benefits.
Okay.
And we were, you know, as you can see, as of February, we were sitting at about almost 27.5. So we wanted to take money, you know, reduce that overweight.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Vehi, thank you, as always. And I ask you this, I think, every time. But so what's your feeling about inflation?
I think it's out there, and it's there was an article today in the Wall Street Journal comparing us to the Eurozone, and they measure it slightly different than we do as far as rents and fuel. I don't think the Fed's worried about deflation anymore, and we're a little bit north of 2%. As far as how that impacts the pension, we have we have inflation baked into the liabilities. I think actually north of 2%, 2.25, or 2.5 perhaps. So we've got it reflected there. As far as the investment portfolio, we have, as we talked about commodities, how'd they do recently? Just out of curiosity. Might have slightly down, but they're up almost 11% for the year. So that's should have some inflation impact, and it's not, even though it's a small percent, you actually get multiples of that as far as the impact on the portfolio with inflation hedge. And then we have real estate, and our in our fixed income stuff we have some TIPS exposure. So I mean, those should shield the portfolio somewhat from inflation, but it is what it is.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anything to add, Bob? All right. On the OPEB?
OPEB, a little bit easier to get through, sitting at about 37.5 million. And it's just distributed between stocks and bonds, although we are, in the coming months, we're actually going to look into diversifying this out a little bit, because as we get to $50 million, we'll have some flexibility with going asset classes as far as account minimums. So that's what we would like to do because right now we're, as you can see, we're 70-30 equities, which has been great with the equity markets going up, but we'd probably like to diversify that a little bit. So you can see the returns, 7.31 fiscal year to date, which its benchmark is also 7%. And it was slightly down the past month.
So do you have to wait to 50 million to diversify more, or as you get closer, you can start to diversify?
Well, we'll see what the what our advisor comes back to as far as, like, we're not going to do private. I would imagine we're not doing private equity. But from the real estate, I think real estate we can't commingle, and I think the minimum there is. It's probably on the order of 5 million for their segregated account. So, of 50 million, that would be 10%. So that's, we're probably not going to go into real estate. With 50 million, we just want to have it set so when we get there, it actually has been, because of the contributions we make, OPEB has been growing pretty rapidly, which I'm sure you guys notice every quarter. So we will probably get there, market dependent, next year. So
Good. Okay, any questions? No questions? Ms. Claire?
Maybe a question for Bob. I don't know if Brian knows it. How much do we add to OPEB each year? How much are the contributions?
$10 million.
10 million?
9 million.
yeah, I was going to guess 8, but yeah.
All right, so it
That's-
should be
that-
next.
That's not how much we add. Let me clarify that a little bit. Let me explain that. That's, we budget about $9+ million. Out of that money comes the payments for the benefits for the year, and then the balance goes into the trust fund.
Okay, so it's a net number.
It's a net number.
Yeah, and I think it was around 7 flowed into it actually last year. Because I think our experience has been pretty good with the actual payments that have to be made. So
Okay, any further questions? Thank you, Brian.
thank you.
Okay, next item, to review the Board of Ed's Q3 fiscal year financial position. And we have Ms. Monsell and Dr. Jones with us. Thank you.
And Mr. Peterson is supposed to be joining us as well, but the board's just finishing a meeting next door.
Okay. Here he is. Welcome. Okay, which report would you like to start off with?
Do you want to just reference
Or
the memo?
would you like me to make that call?
Well, do you need?
We
do you
can
need-
go over this report first, or we can start with the budget projection summary. And the last thing I thought we would do was review your special education budget worksheet.
So start here.
Yeah. Okay, so Well, the report just recaps what's on this page. This page
Okay,
is,
so we can go through this.
right.
Great.
So we're on the color page.
Yep.
This is a summary of the accounts that are under budget, which are in the green, the top of the page in column 1. Then down below that, accounts that are over budget, the gross projected balance on line 28 in column 1. And then this was so complicated because we had the money on reserve, we had the savings from insurance, and then we just broke those out and left, showed all the other accounts. So the bottom line is, after we did restore what was on reserve from the maintenance accounts, we restored that for 916 and change, and we have since restored the technology funds at 235, and then used about half of the reserve for overages. So the net projected balance at the end of the year is 98,000. If you move over to column 3 to the right, the insurance savings, that shows the technology pre-purchase that the board requested during the 18-19 budget process, and then an available $600,000 to return back to the town. So that's the whole story.
Sums So just first question, the intent is to move the 600,000 back to the town. Do you have board support to do that?
Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeff Peterson. I'm the BOF liaison from the board. We did discuss the 600,000 pretty around the table. The thing that we were concerned about was making sure that our maintenance issues were addressed. We were assured by Mr. Cullen that they were. Some of them came in at different numbers than were projected, and we are very comfortable returning the 600,000 to the board, or to the town.
Okay, thank you. To the board, questions from the board? On this document? Okay, no questions on this document, thank you. If we can go to the special education budget, actual and projected. And if you could just, you don't have to go over every number, but if you could just go through every column and let us know how to read this, what we're looking at.
Basically, when you're looking at our special education budget, obviously you're seeing the budget number. The second column over has our excess cost return, and as if you remember, when we go into next year's budget, that's where you would see all of that going to the tuition line. Going forward, this will be the last year where you'll see it broken out like this. And that's that second column over right at the top. That's showing, and then what you see in the middle is where it says all other special ed, and you see the 244. This was revenue that we have billed Bridgeport for, and that is for open choice students, and those are those costs for special education costs that are above $3,000. So that was a new line item for us. When you go to the third column over, you're looking at the actual and estimated expenses for the year. And then on the far right-hand side, obviously, that's the over and the under. We were under in occupational and physical therapy, but you'll notice the other categories, most of them were reasonably close. Where we were, which we have noted all year, the challenging area is that special education tuition to other schools, and that's where you're seeing that the budget is over by 1.8 million. So we've had to close that gap throughout the year. We are hoping going forward that we won't see that same gap. That's primarily attributed to how we're projecting how many students we expect to be outplaced. And this year, that projection, we ended up having about 22 more students than were projected. But again, it really had more to do with projection, not actuals. And so we've changed how we're doing, which we've expressed to the board, how we're projecting for next year. And so we think that we're going to be more on target so that we'll stop seeing this gap that we've seen for the last couple of years. So what you're looking at there is also, there was a little bit of additional in transportation as well. Ms. Munsell, anything else that you would add? Okay. And this is a new report for us, so we're trying to prepare this on a quarterly just because there have been so many questions.
Okay. Ms. Marion?
Thanks very much. So I understand, so the actual versus projections in terms of the outplacement tuition, that you're narrowing, you've got new criteria, I guess, or new ways of looking at, or how, just explain to us, how are you going to get that projected versus actual closer?
We have gone back and studied the last 10 years of actual data, and we've looked at how many students we have in September, how many we have in October, how many we have in April, and we're trying to get better at what number are we utilizing, because we do our budget in December. You know, it goes forward in January. We've plugged this number of students in. How can we make sure that projection is more in line with the actual number of students that will be outplaced? When you look at this current year's budget book, you know, there were, I believe it was 88, somewhere around in there, were actually put into the budget, you know, in December of last year. But by the time we actually got to actuals, it was just over 100 students. So if you're off 20 to 25 students in outplacements, when they average $112,000 per outplacement, it adds up very, very quickly. So it's not a whole lot of students when you think we have 10,000 students. It's just the cost driver if that projection's off. We have, after studying the data, we've got a new way that we're projecting going forward into next year's budget. And if you look at the number that's in the budget next year, it is more in line with our actual right now. And you can see that. There's a chart, and it's in towards the back of the budget book.
So I know this has been discussed before, but are we hopeful that we're able to keep more children within the Fairfield Public School system moving forward with some of the things that you're changing and implementing?
We want to make sure that we have the services available to keep as many students. This is where they'd like to be. They would like to be in their home school. And some of the programming that we're doing, especially on the behavioral aspect, is going to help us be able to do that. We feel confident about that. But this is really more of a reflection of a number that's in the budget that was a projected number of students. Getting that more in line with the actual number. It's not like all of a sudden 24 students showed up in September. It's that the way we're applying it to the budget is we're trying to really look at actuals, and we've studied that trend line.
So it's not so much we were over, is that we projected incorrectly.
That's correct.
Okay. Good. Any other questions?
Sure.
Mr. Walsh?
The all other sped line where you say for the excess costs, return and open choice sped revenue. The 244,482 is the revenue that we billed the other schools?
That's correct.
And what was the cost for that? Is that the exact cost? All the cost?
Anything that's over 3,000, that's the exact cost.
Okay. And were we off on that budgeted amount?
For this current year, it wasn't in the budget, right?
What did we budget for that versus what was actual?
Let us
So
just
that-
double check. This is the first year, actually at the end of last year. We'll have to see how we plug that in. I don't know if it was in last year's, because we just did it at the end of last year. What was projected for 17, 18? No, that's right. It wasn't. Yeah, I don't think it was in the budget. That's what we were just discussing, because at the end of last year, if you remember, I arrived in December. We actually billed Bridgeport last year at the very end of the year, which was something we had never done before. Literally, I think you actually drove over and picked up the check on June 30th. We had never had that approach before. This year, we had already done the budget for this school year, but we invoiced them very early at the beginning of this school year. They knew this year to expect it, and they've already actually sent the check and paid this invoice this year. So it is reflected in next year's budget, and we talked about it during the budget process, where you can see it in the revenue line item now.
So we don't have anything to compare it to budget because there was no budget for it.
Yeah, it wasn't, it's a new revenue stream.
And what was the reasoning for never billing Bridgeport or any of these other school systems on the open choice before for that, when we were always legally allowed to do that? Why would we give up that revenue source?
Well, I think it's just a different approach and interpretation of the law and what you can and can't do. I can't answer for that beforehand. I just know we billed them last year. And part of that too, the culture is changing in Connecticut, where if you remember, they changed in how they were billing us for more of our magnet last year, which caused everybody to, ask legal counsel to weigh in on what you do have to pay and what you don't have to pay.
But that part of the law was extremely clear. I mean, I've read the law. I mean, there was no way you can interpret it another way. It said that you were able to get excess cost on special education costs.
Yeah.
So, was
Yeah.
it just a determination by the district not to bill them?
Yeah, I can't go back and know who made that decision, but it was billed above the per pupil amount, is what Ms. Munsell was saying.
But Ms. Munsell was here before you. What was the
know. Do you know where
discussions
that came
in-house
from?
with Dr. Title and your predecessors?
It was the interpretation of the special ed department that we would bill, allowed to bill for the cost over the per pupil amount,
It was the interpretation that you could or you couldn't?
that we could and we did.
Okay, but prior to Dr. Jones getting here, you didn't do that, correct?
No,
Pupil, not 3,000.
right.
You didn't do it.
We billed for the amount over our per pupil cost. So if ours was 17,000.
Yes.
Anything that was over that, we would bill. Now we're doing it based on the 3,000.
On the 3,000.
Right,
But the law hasn't changed, correct?
no.
Okay. It just seems like there was a loss of revenue for many years on this program. That is hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay. And is there any way to go back and get any of that money?
No. And it's based on actual services,
Sure.
so,
So we supplied the
Yes.
actual services, right? We just didn't bill for them.
Right.
Okay. All right. And on the special education, the total excess cost, the special education tuition, other schools, that solely you believe is in the red by $1.8 million because of those 24 additional students?
Yes.
Other than that, we're on budget. We were on budget.
Yeah, and every year is different because you have kids that move in and kids that move out. Tuition rates, range from, 40,000 to, a couple of 100,000. But we look at the total number of students and is that number what we budgeted for? And if it's not, then that's when you end up having a gap in the budget.
Okay. Back to the all other sped costs. Out of the $807,569, so part of that's made up by, we just didn't know what the budgeted costs were, correct?
know which one
And
is
then
that?
part of it was for what the state cut back, is that correct? Or is there some other reason for the total deficit on that line being 800?
no, that's not a deficit, that's just an expense. It's shown in red and.
Oh, that's
and
the expenses
right.
actually. So we were actually
We
to the
actually have-
positive by 490?
Right.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Nothing else, Mr. Walsh? Anyone else? So on this document, under the column, actual and estimated expenses to year end, the total is 13,734,000?
Mhm.
And that's before reimbursement?
Wasting away to nothing.
Right, that's just expenditures alone. That has nothing to do with reimbursement, yes.
So the reimbursement would reduce that number? The
Right.
excess cost reimbursement
Right,
would
for a
reduce that
net of
number?
the 1.4,
For net.
yeah.
Okay. Good. Any other questions from the board? Ms. Marion?
So just looking at the excess cost transportation of 1.4 million and change, could you just explain that to us? Excess cost transportation?
Well, that line, the excess cost transportation is the 339. That's not meant to reference the negative 1.4. Right, that's the total over budget, but the excess cost transportation is referring to the 339, 302 in the revenue column, the second column in.
So we were 1.5 million over budget on the special education costs. That's what that line is.
Total.
On total.
I see.
Right.
Got,
That's what's in yellow.
thank you. I don't see the colors. Thank you.
All right, very good, thank you. Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 3, to review the town's quarter 3 fiscal 18 financial position. Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Bossy is going to lead the discussion.
We'll start out with the summary sheet. I think that's probably the best place to kind
be
of
this?
summarizes. Yes.
Okay.
So we did for Mary's request, put the Q1, Q2, and Q3 on there, so you can kind of get a feel for where we are. Q3 column, if we look at the revenue first, I think it's actually a good picture this quarter. As you can see on the revenue, the top section, we're up $2.2 million, about broken out into the various categories. The first one, as you could tell, is the favorability on the current and prior taxes of the 1.2 from the negative 2.5. The town clerk went up a little bit due to better inventory and a little bit better market. Building revenues stayed the same, the favorable 280, due to a couple of big Fairfield U and Sacred Heart projects. State aid, as you could see, went up more favorable by about $400,000. The large chunk of that, as on the state sheet, which was the one behind it, was due to the school building grants. There was a favorable $324,000, which we were not expecting this year, which is from the old pre-96 school construction projects, because they were done in a different way. Now it's on a net basis that we do not bond for state reimbursements. Back then, we bonded for the whole amount, and then the state reimbursed us through the financing of our bonds that we issued. So that revenue was from a couple years ago, which we were not expecting. That program, this is the last year that we actually budgeted for. It's closed now as of 18, so they were probably doing some cleanup work up at the state. So that was in our favor. Park and Rec revenue got a little bit less favorable due to, in essence, and you can see in the comments, the rainy and cold month of April at the golf course. So we really took a hit on that. In March also, in speaking with Peter, Grace, and Anthony, they normally try to open up around St. Patty's Day, was not able to open up until I think March 28th this year. So we basically lost the whole month of March due to snow, late snow. Also, investment income stayed the same, and the other revenue went up slightly as well. And again, you could see on the revenue sheets, bulk of it, fire marshal fees, they had a fee increase, and they had some larger projects there. A lot of smaller we have some new leases and stuff on our rental. Our Harvest New England now pays us a rent of about $4,000 a month. And better conservation numbers, a lot of smaller variances that kind of increased it. And one bigger one was the paving reimbursement. We're going to get about $250,000 from the gas and the water company. They're tearing up our roads, so they reimburse us for that. So that was really the difference in the other revenue, which then increased about $2.2 million on the revenue side. You guys have any questions on the revenue piece?
Were you reviewing this as well? Or just-
If you want
This is
to.
the details of
That's the
this,
detail
right?
of those numbers.
Okay.
The
any
comments
questions?
get into a little bit more detail than I just clearly went over, but
Yeah.
that's the summary.
Any questions?
Yep.
Mr. Walsh?
The current and prior year tax levy, why did that dramatically increase?
That's gone through a couple of iterations. You can see the first quarter, we assumed that we were going to have the tax sale. And, but there was some, looked like there was some favorability on the collection rate. And then when we got to the second quarter, we realized that we didn't need to have the tax sale. So the unfavorable rate is taking the tax sale out of the equation. And then this quarter, tax sale is still out of the equation. And it's been offset by primarily three issues, or not three issues, but three sources. One is the collection rate favorability, I think is about 600,000. Plus we have a couple $100,000 in the, we budget recoveries and reimbursements, returns. We have about $250,000, $300,000 savings there. And then we had fewer appraisal adjustments than we budgeted.
Yeah, just I've never seen numbers move this way between 3 different quarters.
Yeah, it's kind of, the tax sale and became the plug number.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that number I understand, because that was
Yeah.
$3 million change, but that was, I definitely had understood that, but it just,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not complaining, it's a positive number. I just didn't know whether you had predicted that that was going to happen, or is it something that just all of a sudden just materialized by the end of this quarter?
No, it's an evolving thing. We do at the early in the with respect to like appraisal adjustments and reimbursement adjustments, we kind of look very conservatively on those in the first couple of months, first couple of quarters. Then they get more refined after 6 months.
On the town clerk revenues, I don't think there's a surprise in this number, at least not to me. This number seems to always be under estimated until the spring market comes along, and then, or even right after, before the third quarter, and then all of a sudden everything trues back up again. So there's got to be a better way to kind of predict some of that stuff. And I understand that you're getting those numbers from the town clerk, but they might want to be brought in-house to the finance department to come up with better predictability on some of that stuff.
We've had some conversations with them about using prior year averages and trends and
Yeah.
ratios and that type of thing.
Yeah.
We'll see where it goes.
The other explanations for the first 2 quarters are always kind of no real basis for what those numbers are. But I think what you're talking about is something I think might be helpful. I think Ms. Bossi explained the state aid number pretty well, which I think is a great thing. The other, I mean, I will tell you that from a number of my clients who are commercial businesses, they're kind of shocked about this $100 fee by the fire marshal that has just been instituted. So was that budgeted for?
No, it was part of the,
Just for some people that don't know, what we're talking about is that now when the fire marshal goes to each business in town to do an inspection, which they try to get to once a year, Bob, they now charging each business $100 for that inspection, which was never been charged before. So just today, I got a call today about what's this $100 for, and some businesses who are struggling a little bit are just not happy about not only paying the personal property tax, but on top of that, now having to pay this $100 fee.
yeah, that was part of that whole analysis that the administration went through with everybody. What are other towns doing, and how can we increase our revenues, reduce our expenses? And apparently we were on the very low end with respect to our fee schedule there. And one of the things they're also doing, I think, for new construction on fire marshal is, instead of just a flat $50, it's like, $5 per X number of square feet, and then over X number of bucks it increases. More like the building department's scales now, rather than flat fees.
Mr. Becker, have a follow-up? Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, just coming out of that, it wasn't just fire marshal, there were obviously other fees and things, and I know that we sometimes talk about how to adjust fees. It just seems like that's an instance maybe where sort of striking the balance on the whole, the business friendly, and also claiming that we have lower, we didn't raise taxes by X, amount, it wasn't so bad. Yeah, but we nailed them with fees all over the place. I mean, and that's just a little concerning, particularly, sort of what Mr. Walsh brought up from specific business owners. And it
Yeah.
wasn't something that we did. I mean, it was sort of, I guess it was the administration or commission or something like that that ultimately made the decision on thresholds.
Yeah, I mean, the total value of, if you want to, relate it to taxes, if you take the total of the positive, the variances on the fire marshal fees, plus the additional fees for building, I mean, you're less than 1% of your tax base. So it's, so it's not really a major impact on your taxes. It's a minor impact. So it's not done to say it does. So it doesn't save that much on the taxes, but it does save a little bit, and it adds up over the period of time.
I think the businesses that are complaining to me about it, or they're more feeling nickel and dimed.
Yeah.
It's like they're paying their taxes, they're trying to survive, and then all of a sudden a random $100 bill comes in that they've never seen before, nor read about before, that it was even coming. It's just all of a sudden, this is the bill, and they're calling town hall and saying, what the hell is this? And, oh, sorry, that's just the fee. It is what it is.
Yeah, no, I was only referring to Mr. Becker's comment about we're saving a lot of taxes. We're making a statement that we're trying to cover up big tax increases where
I think I'm
relative to the
talking-
taxes is
Talking
nominal.
Somewhat the totality of all fees versus tax. I mean, not specific just this, but this is one example. I mean, I happen to agree that some additional revenue in the fire marshal's office was probably warranted. But some of these things, particularly round numbers that hit a big business or a small business in a lot of ways, similarly, that's tough. And I know, throughout our downtown in particular, but there's small businesses all over the place in town that is a big hit. And, the taxes and all of that, it's just being business friendly and not nickel and diming or ultimately causing something when it adds up.
These aren't my decisions, obviously. The only thing I can say, what I do know is that when they looked at what other towns were doing and did comparisons, it's my understanding that we stayed under the median. We didn't zoom to the top. So we're still in the lower half is close, as I understand it.
On this topic, Mr. Bertolo, go ahead.
Excuse me. Can we get, I don't know if you can do it, Bob, like a schedule of what they charge, Fire Marshal Division? Because I'm not sure if it's for just, is it a new business that they're looking at a building and they're going through it? I just
It's
wanna
new
know what-
businesses.
Some getting
and-
called, or the businesses have been here for a long time, and also
They
are
get
getting
an
this first bill for the
inspection
very
once a
first
year.
time, that every time the fire marshal comes for their annual visit, then all of a sudden they're getting some invoice from the town of
Okay.
Fairfield. I'm not sure if it's from the fire marshal's department or whether it's from the
It's-
town
it's-
itself.
It's from the fire marshal department, and we don't, I mean, technically, the town is supposed to visit every facility every year,
Yeah.
and then they would build them every year, and I'm not sure what the actual cycle is, but it's definitely not once every year.
There's,
So, like once
I-
every 3 years, or maybe even more.
I know there's a requirement of the statute that they're supposed to inspect yearly.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
And it's extremely costly for the municipalities. The municipality where I work, it's virtually impossible to comply with the statute because there's just too many businesses. So maybe this is a way to try to offset that, I guess. But if
I mean, you
There's
could
a
you
fee
can hire
schedule I'd like
lots
to
of
see
fire
it.
marshals and hit everybody every year.
thanks.
Well, is that the plan? Is that
I don't
to get
think
this
so.
extra money to get another fire marshal to offset that? I mean, I just don't know.
I think it was just, the major plan, I think, was to try to bring our fees into alignment with, near alignment with neighboring towns. There has been discussion about maybe beefing up, but I don't think those discussions are, at this point, seriously contemplated.
So, Mr. Walsh, you like a reasoning behind the fee?
Well, I think I know. I mean, I don't know what the reasoning is. I mean, I think
So
there.
we can ask for one for
I
whoever
guess.
makes
Well,
the
I'm
decision.
giving you the reason was to
Kinda
bring
giving
our
it,
fees
yeah.
up to a more normative range with our surrounding communities.
What Bob's saying is there's been a review of the fees, and that's why they decided to do it.
All right, just a couple more questions on this, and let's get rolling. Ms. Zesma?
Actually, Mr. Mayor answered my
No, come
question,
back.
and that is that we're now on par with other towns.
We're in mid-range, is my understanding.
All right, Mr. Becker?
I was gonna say, and to some extent, we're getting close to a point where we're revenue and expense neutral with these, right? I mean, it's a couple $100,000 and a couple
That's one of the intents, right?
That's sort of one of the benefits. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
How much is raised by this new fee?
Says $100,000.
Well, no, I mean, how many do they, annual inspections do they do times 100?
I think Caitlin can pull that out.
I have the budget book for 19, I don't know. Budget in 18 was 123. It wasn't 18 then.
So the 3-year average for prior to 18 was 32,000. The budget for 18 is 123,000. So since we have a favorability on this line item of, what's the number, 110,000? 140,000, so increased in fees from, and combined increase of fees and activity of $250,000 approximately.
You think we'll make another 250,000?
Over the prior 3 years,
Okay.
more than the prior 3 years.
Oh, okay. All right. If you could just find out from the chief approximately how many inspections they do a year, just to get some sense of what type of numbers we're expecting on that line.
So, Bob, was it a new fee or just raising a fee?
Raising a fee,
Gotcha, thanks.
And if you can get the prior fee, that would be great.
right.
Okay. Mr. Walsh, any other question? Any questions from the board? The last line, estimated increase in fund balance. What is our fund balance at this point?
I'm sorry, sir?
Our fund balance?
28, $9 million, something like that?
Are we going to have Ms. Bossy do the expenses, Jim, before we get down to the fund balance number? She's only done revenue.
Yeah.
Okay.
27,839,000 coming into this year.
Okay. All right, Ms. Bossy.
Okay,
Expenses?
on the expense side, operational savings, about $1.4 million, 1.1 due to vacancies. Fire injuries a negative 234, and there's other favorability of 537 that you'll see in the expense detailed report, totaling the 1468. There are no more hold savings. The 229 has been released from Q2. The FY18 operational adjustments, that's something that we wanted to, well, we can skip that part for now. FY18 BOE savings was a 600 that was just mentioned in the previous agenda item. We would not have to use any reserves, so the 1128 would not need to be used. And then the fund balance contribution shortfall, we would need the 85,000 to keep us up at the 9.53%, which is where we were at the end of fiscal 17. So if we want to circle back up to the operational adjustments, or do you want to ask questions about the operational savings?
To the board?
The operational savings is a better number for us by about $400,000.
Yep.
And what is the difference between that operational savings between Q2 and Q3?
The vacancy number in Q2 was 936, so if you're comparing that to a 1165.
Yep.
The fire injury number was a negative 160, and the other was a favorable 262.
And in the other, what made up the extra $250,000?
A big piece of it is there's favorability in the IT department of 133,000. due to a lower rate on the licensing, which I think was brought to your attention in the fiscal 19 budget year. And they also realigned our munis payment to fall with our fiscal year. So this year, we only had 7 months' worth of expense because it was a yearly contract that ended, I think, at the end of October or November. So we asked them to then bill us through June 30 so that we weren't crossing fiscal years. So as a result, I don't want to say prepaid, but we paid 4 months of this year in fiscal 17, and so we had those 4 months worth of savings in the IT department. So those two pieces made up 133 favorable that we did not know about in Q2 in the IT department. That's really the largest variance there. There's some smaller numbers, nothing bigger than police has favorable 52,000. That's our next biggest, as you can see on the expense line, due to maintenance and repair of automotives. And then they were smaller savings, better pricing on some cars or for ECC, snow-related repairs, nothing big. Pay differential at the library due to reduced hours was another $20,000. Just smaller numbers make up the difference.
Is the fiscal year fund balance contribution shortfall, is that a plug number?
No, that's a calculation. Basically, last year, we didn't do when we were closing the books and we were making the transfers over to the current year.
Yeah.
We didn't nail the number. We ended up being $85,000 short last year, so we're making that up this year.
So going back to the do no harm policy, that brings us back up to the 9.53.
Yeah.
And we had a
Do we know about that? I can't remember that.
Yeah, I don't know if we've ever
the
talked
discussion on
about it
this
here. No, I
$85,000
don't
number.
remember. We basically, when we closed out our accounts payable, it just, we had a bunch of big bills in there, more bills than we anticipated, so we ended up having more expensive than we thought. And that was not realized till after the Board of Finance had already made the transfers. So so I think I first became aware of this in late September, October.
All right.
And so we,
Should we have gotten that on earlier, I guess?
Well, this number could still change. It
Yeah.
depends on all the actuals where they fall anyway. So we just put it on here saying if we wanted to make sure, as of today, given these numbers, if we wanted to do no harm, we would need the 85. But depending on where the revenue and expense fall, we could be way above this.
Okay. I'm confused, though. Bob says a specific $85,000 that your accounts payable
Well, if
is
you're looking at the
over.
budget,
What?
budget to budget, so taking the fiscal 17,
Yep.
and you're saying if you're going to be on budget,
no,
but if you look
that's
at
the
the,
538.
no,
This-
yeah, I
this is
understand that.
just to make up for the shortfall for the
To
fiscal
get you
year
to the
ending
85.
The 17,
To get you to the 9.53.
at the end of last year.
Right, but that number could still change given where the actuals are.
This is the shortfall from last year. We didn't put enough in there last year.
But we know the 9.53.
That's,
I guess the question is my question is if you guys go over on accounts payable and you pay more because bills come in and it's after our fourth quarter meeting, right? Is that what we're talking about, some of these bills?
closing the books.
Closing the books.
Okay.
And then you know that number. Should that get on in the first quarter report as,
I
as
wasn't
a
aware,
number?
I wasn't aware of it then.
What?
I hadn't become aware of it
Okay.
then. I hadn't gone back and looked.
Okay. All right. We can talk about that offline. It's not a big deal. Okay. Yeah, I think the only thing left for me, unless anybody else, is the fiscal year adjustments, operational adjustments.
Yeah. Any other questions on expenses?
Well, she's about to review the fiscal year operational
Well,
adjustments.
from what she's talked about so
Oh, okay.
far. No? Okay. Good.
Okay, given where we ended up with the revenue and not wanting to use reserves if we didn't have to, we were saying if we had this million or so, $1.1 million, $1.2 million, to get us back to to increase the fund balance by at least the 538, what could we use the 1.2 million on. So we went back to the DPW department, knowing that they always get hit, and said, if we had this, if we had this 1.2 million or so, what would we use it on? We came back with a list of capital items that had been cut in either 18 or 19 on vehicles. There'd be additional paving, and we know of a HVAC control security project for about $100,000.
What vehicle?
So these are past vehicles that were cut out of the budget?
They were cut out of the
Now
budget.
that you guys are going back and purchasing?
No, we're saying this would be a transfer out of contingency if this was so approved for these to be able to be purchased.
And when would that vote happen?
June.
So you're just predicting that?
No, we're
you'll-
saying if it happened, so because now we don't have to use the 1.1 in reserves,
Yep.
what could that be used on? That would have to go to you guys for a vote to come out of contingency.
But in essence, right now, as we stand here today, we're actually the 1.1 plus the 1.2 over. So we're 2.338 over.
If you chose not
To
to
do,
have
like-
that negative 1.2, given that math. So you'd
Yes.
add the 1138 plus the 1200.
Yeah. Yes, but as we sit here today, at the end of the third quarter, we're really up 2.338.
Yes,
Okay, okay. And these are just some ideas you have on the table right now?
correct.
Okay, okay. I've just never seen where we've done this whole thing with putting, actually at the end of the third quarter. As a matter of fact, it's never happened before, ever, that we've ever done it this way.
Well, I agree, but we also didn't use reserves ever before in Q2 too to
Yeah, I know.
balance it. So there's a
Yep.
lot of different things going on in this report.
So-
Yeah.
and then
The reserves are all gone, right? There's no more reserves left?
No, there's that 1,000,001 there that we're not using.
Oh, I thought that went to zero.
Because we don't need it.
Use of it goes to zero. The reserves are there. But in the prior years, we've carried over the reserves for the following year. You guys have voted that
Okay.
at our
So
request.
another way we
So
could
this-
do it
This year,
is-
we're not.
Okay.
This year, instead of saying, hey, let's carry this over to next year,
So you want to the way I'm looking at this, you're trying to carry over that 1.1 to the next year is what, it seems to be what the administration seems to be saying. Because you're
No.
pulling it out.
keeping the 1.1 on the books, yes, and using the 1.2 million, which if we actually get the 600,000 from the school board, which would go up to 1.8 million, and do additional paving and buy additional trucks.
Okay.
In other words, so we're gonna have the current reserve amount, we're gonna have the amount where they're creating, and rather than coming here and saying, hey, let's carry this forward again to help with future, because we know next year the state, as I understand it, so one could say, let's carry it all over, but there's been a lot of conversation about maybe we should do more paving, the trucks, we really need some of these trucks. So instead of saying carry it over as a reserve for future, we're saying let's spend it on paving, let's spend it on some of the trucks.
It's hypothetical. We'll have to see.
Right, and what we would,
Fourth
right.
quarter.
So what we would do, what we would bring before you at the June meeting are these recommendations more firmly, and you would vote yes or no, then we would cut the POs if the numbers, and we would encumber the amounts, but we wouldn't fully order all the material, but we'd encumber it. And then if it turned out that we didn't realize our targets,
Yeah.
our new targets, we'd pull them back.
See, I think we're gonna have to have a real big conversation about these numbers. I mean, I think it's a very, like a lot of positive things, that there's a lot of money here. But I think we're gonna have a big conversation in June about how it's gonna be spent and what's gonna happen with it. Because on top of the $2.3 million of surplus we seem to have at the end of quarter three, taking out these uses, we also have the reserves, which we all gotta be aware of the 1.1. But we're gonna have to have a big conversation, because I'm looking at this operational adjustment list, and I'm seeing that you wanna spend $550,000 potentially in paving. And the guy who's sitting in the crowd was just before us at our budget, saying we don't need any more paving. He just had a budget before us and put a budget number together with paving, and he has a budget, and we gave him everything he wanted in paving. And we asked him, do you need any more paving? Because we're all concerned that his paving number was going down. And he said, no, we're great with the paving number. We feel really good with where we are. And now all of a sudden you seem to want to throw $550,000 at him. And it just looks like it's like budget adjustments. Like, it just seems like you under budgeted paving, or the administration did, not you. I'm sorry, Bob. I'm not saying you or anybody from finance. I'm saying the administration, all of a sudden it just looks kind of funny that all of a sudden now you want $550,000 worth of paving done.
Everything you said is correct.
Thank you.
The one, and that's totally, absolutely true about the trucks in a way, except because but the trucks were cut. They requested trucks were cut. With respect to the paving, Ms. Bossy mentioned earlier that this $260,000 check that's coming in from the
Gas and water.
gas and water companies.
Yes.
In Mr. Bartlett's budget expectations, even though he only budgeted $2 million, he thought that $250 million was his. Excuse me, that $250,000. He thought that was his money, so he was anticipating using 250 of it anyway. But it doesn't work that way. You don't get to spend the revenue.
Yeah.
Right, so we had to explain that to him.
Be like the fire marshal saying, I just billed the $100 per house, and I want to keep all that and buy some other stuff now.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. Good analogy. So basically, so he was, so to make him whole in his mind, as opposed to the way it's actually presented in the budget books, he needs $260,000 more. And then the other 200 or 300,000 is extra. But yes.
Is extra, which
Yeah.
we were represented by
Right.
both the first selectman's budget that was before us
Yeah.
and the DPW's budget that we don't need it, and asked multiple times because some of us were concerned about it.
Matter of fact, I think it's less next year. I think it's 1.5 million, right? 2018 budget.
So it went down?
No, I think the budget.
So
I don't know.
I guess we'll just have to have, I mean, I guess I don't want to belabor the point now. The good news is we have like $2.3 million of surplus at the end of Q3, so it's been a great quarter. And we have another $1.1 million in reserves that we thought we were going to spend as of last quarter that we're not going to spend. So that pushes that reserve up to $3.4 million. We have at least 3.4 we can figure out what to do with.
Right.
Yep.
Fund balance improvement.
Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly.
the budget for next year's paving is $1.5 million, as you
Right.
just pointed out. That's why I thought about this.
Is the DPW HVAC control security, that $100,000, is that in this coming year's budget?
No, that's something that I discovered, God, I don't know, a few months ago, and been working to figure out how to address it. Our heating and air conditioning controls are managed by computers. The computers are run on ancient software. The ancient software is not properly serviced anymore, so it's become very vulnerable for hacking. So to change to the new computers, we need to change the control units. And so we have had lots of meetings with IT, with DPW, and we talked to a couple of vendor types. We finally went out to bid. We came to a conclusion how we want to do it. We went out to bid, got a proposal back, and actually we had estimated 100,000. I think it's only going to be like 75,000. And so that's another thing we're going to ask you to fund. Now, we could fund that out of current year contingency, or we can fund that out of this, but it's something I think is very important, and that's why I put it on here. That from my perspective, personally, that I really want you to approve. The other $1.1 million, that's up to you guys, and I don't have a dog in that fight.
Great. Excellent.
All right.
I'm all set.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Anyone else? Okay. What other document would you like to review? since you're here?
I think that's it.
That's it? Are there any questions on the estimated state revenue worksheet?
You want that?
Guess we need that eventually.
How, have we received everything from the state that we're supposed to get for the year?
No.
How much more money do we need to get from the state?
I don't know, we have another month or so of, certain things come in quarterly, some
Okay.
come in
Oh,
monthly,
they do,
some
okay,
come
okay.
in twice a year. It's,
We're anticipating getting everything, though, that,
Everything you anticipate getting everything we.
yeah,
they're all in the projection, yeah.
Okay.
yeah. I think that might have gone up and down during the year as well.
Okay. If there are no further questions, we'll move on.
Good quarter.
Yep, good quarter. One to go.
Yeah, hopefully the third quarter, not hopefully, but generally the third quarter is going to be good information as opposed to the first quarter is real weak. Second quarter is a little better. Third quarter should be fairly, but so I'm anxious to see what the fourth quarter looks like.
Right. Should be okay, though.
Yeah, should be.
Good.
Okay, item number 4, to hear an update on the pile cleanup. Mr. Michelangelo.
Good evening, Joe Michelangelo, Director of Public Works. As you know, the Public Works Department has constructed a landscape berm from the material we have at the aggregate pile at the Public Works Yard. We started approximately April 2nd. A large part of the early work was installing all the sedimentation control, testing the material before we were going to move it, waiting for those tests to come back. So we got started in earnest probably about mid-April, moving the material in the pile to create a landscape berm that serpentines around the property to the south and shields both the Harvest New England operation and the Public Works operations to the properties to the south. So we're doing this with town employees, utilizing existing funds. There hasn't been any additional requests for money, and most of the stuff that's involved, like I said, in addition to the environmental testing, the materials, so the seeds, the plantings, the fencing, things along those lines. So we're probably halfway duration-wise through, and the way the berm is constructed, the part that's behind us is the longest haul, so to speak. So we had to move material. The furthest we had to move material is behind us. We started constructing it behind Harvest New England. So the berm is taking shape. It looks good. The next 6 weeks that we have of the project, because we want to complete it by June 30th, is moving as much material, but we're not moving it as far. So as far as the budget implications, some of the items are coming in somewhat higher than expected, somewhat lower than expected, but in total, we are not going to expend any additional funds other than we have in the Public Works operating budget, and will be done totally with FY18 funding.
Any questions? Ms. Marion? Marion?
Thank you very much. So you talk about you're not going to expend more than you thought. Could you just remind us what is the budget for this in terms of materials? And then you mentioned that you're using the town employees to build this, but is there any overtime? Or try to give us a sense of how much does it cost in staff time, if possible, to build this burn? I know that it's within, you're using the town employees and they're salaried, but how much is this costing us?
Okay. Well, the total amount we figured was approximately $65,000, and that does not include the town labor. On any given day, we have from 4 to 7 employees at the site. And overtime, we work them just an hour and a half extra to get the full workday out of it. So instead of quitting at 3:30, we've been running them to 5 o'clock just to get the more productive days out of it. So there is some overtime involved in that. The other cost, like I said, the environmental tests, every grid or every cube we move, we do have tested. So the town employees, like I said, that's the man hours, so it's approximately, probably about 200 man hours a week of town employees doing the work up there.
So can you give us a guesstimate of the cost of the labor?
I could get that to you, but I'd have to calculate it quick.
I'm just curious, because you're using town employees,
Yeah.
but you're also going into overtime, correct?
Correct, yeah. So just in round numbers, if we use 5 employees up there a week, just in straight salary, that would probably be somewhere around 6,000 to 7,000, not counting benefits or anything like that.
That's per employee
Uh,
or per,
Well, no, so if you have an employee that makes 50,000 a week, 50,000 a year, and he makes 1,000 a week,
so it's going to cost us approximately $6,000 to $7,000 in labor.
well, we could figure out what the labor costs are involved, but once again, the labors are part of the Public Works operating budget. So we could get the total man-hours spent up there at the end of the day.
I'd appreciate that. I'm just interested in what is the actual cost to the town, to the taxpayer, in terms of what we're doing with this. Thank you.
Joe, do you not know what the cost is?
Once again, it's an ongoing project.
Do you know what the cost is as of right now?
Well, as of right now, we've spent very little because we haven't done any of the seeding yet, any of the planting. So we had to rent a piece of equipment because we had a piece of equipment go down. So far, the out-of-pocket cost that we spent up there is probably less than $20,000.
And you don't have a projected cost, and you have to have some, what do you think it's gonna be?
We originally projected $65,000. We still say we're going to be there or somewhere close to there. But once again, whatever, if we do go over, it'd be minimal. It'll be absorbed by the Public Works budget.
Okay.
When you're paying this overtime, you're not paying it out of the 60 grand, are you? Or are you paying that out of just your budget that you currently have in place?
Everything is being paid out of the current budget we have in place.
Okay. So you're, based on some of these numbers we're hearing tonight, your overtime, you're going to blow your overtime budget?
No, we will not.
So, okay, so you'll be right within, you'd had all these hours built into overtime?
Well, once again, we do have overtime built in, so we have other guys working overtime also that aren't working on our pile work, different parts of town.
Okay, but you must be doing, there's obviously things not getting done if you're within your budget, correct? Because you built a budget,
Yep.
you have an overtime line,
Mhm.
and out of the blue, you're having to do this work at 200 hours per week, you think?
Correct.
Of it all overtime or some straight time?
No, all straight time except for man hours of overtime, about 10.
Okay, so Joe, I don't believe that you would build a budget that you had 200 hours, that we're getting all the same stuff done, and you just missed 800 hours a month
Okay.
of time for guys. You just built that into your budget. So
Okay.
you have to be not doing things that you would normally do.
And the way we do our work schedule, obviously we prioritize stuff, we make decisions what we do, what we don't do. And the stuff that we don't do is and I'll give you examples. So
Yeah, that's where I'm getting. So
Yep.
in general, if you could give me examples of things that you were planning on doing and that you're just not going to do this year to give
Okay.
the town a sense of what this is really costing the town.
Okay. And I'll give it like cleaning catch basins and drainage outlets. That's something that we have 5,000 catch basins, we have 1,000 drainage outlets. Every one of those should be cleaned probably about every 2 years. So once again, so that's the kind of stuff that we would defer on during this period. So it will get done, it just won't get done during this peak crunch time of year. Another example is our roads. We like to give our roads haircuts. Legal limit for a truck driving is 14 feet of clearance. Obviously, when you cut a road, you don't want to cut it to 14 feet because in 2 months, the growth will be, the canopy will form again. So every 2 or 3 years, we'll give the road a haircut to a nice 16-foot level to buy us some time, and then 2 or 3 later, you have to go back and do those. So there are a bunch of those maintenance type items that we're always doing that aren't critical that we do in May or June of 2018. And as far as the man hours, we have a very large department. We have a lot of work to do, and I like to think that, that our men and our budget, the good thing about having employees and money to do stuff is there's some flexibility. I'd say in, October and November of this year, between retirements and guys on injury leave, we had a guy pass away, we were probably down 9 or 10 employees at one time. So, I'd like to think we're flexible enough to get all of our work done with the guys we have and ratchet it up and pull it back so we always meet the demand. What I would say, and we need, always need X amount of man hours.
And I take it that you're keeping track of every one of these man hours so that we can try to, in our litigation, try to get it back as part of our award if we're successful, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So there's a possibility that some of this money may be coming back to the town if we're successful in our action, correct?
Hopefully.
Okay. And how much longer do you think it's going to take to build these berms?
By June 30th, it'll be completed.
Fully completed?
Correct. And once again, I'd say some of the stuff is timing critical with the plantings.
Okay.
So, with the germination of the grass and the planted trees, if we're June 15th to June 30th, we'll encumber, same thing, if we don't have everything planted, we'll encumber the money to make sure we could do it August 15th to finish it up when it could grow better chance of surviving.
And you're continuously checking the fill as you move it from one location, from the pile to the berm. You're randomly taking out samples to make sure that it's clean fill, correct?
Correct. We have a licensed environmental professional following the protocol. Every X amount of cubic yards, it gets tested, approved, then it gets moved.
And since April 2nd, when you started this whole process, you've not found any further contamination, correct?
I think we've probably done probably upwards of maybe 45 tests, and there were 2 small hits just above the residential threshold, but nowhere near the industrial threshold. And in addition to the testing, the environmental professional there, we have a work safety plan for our employees. It's been vetted with the people that do the work. Weekly tailgate sessions for safety. So I think we've gone over and above everything we had to do as far as that's concerned.
Okay, when we find that it's over the residential standards, do we clean up or do we just move it because we consider that to be a commercial operation?
We're allowed to move it. It's allowed to be put in a section of the pile.
Okay. Okay. The only problem is if we ever decide to sell part of that, we wouldn't be able to. We'd have to clean it up to residential standards ourselves. But obviously, we need your lot for a long time.
But given that it's an old landfill, it's not ever going to be residential.
Okay. These berms are close to the water, correct?
They're set back from the marsh, but yeah, they're above the coastal jurisdiction line, but they're within 100 feet of them.
Okay. And not knowing your business and this issue, which you obviously know a lot better than all of us here, is there any problem with any of that material that you're moving that is contaminated to above residential standards to leach into any of the marshes, anything that would be considered state land, state waters, or federal waters into this tidal water that's coming in and causing us any potential liability?
No, and once again, we went through a full coastal site plan.
Right.
And as part of our landfill closure, we're going to have 6 monitoring wells there, to test for the historical stuff that's in the ground, and that'll pick up anything else that comes there anyway.
Okay. And that's all I have for now. If anybody else has any questions.
Anyone? Any other questions? You can
If
continue,
nobody else
Mr.
has
Wall.
any, if I can just ask one more. I know we're in litigation. I know there's certain areas I can't go, but one thing that just keeps coming to mind as this issue keeps coming up is, if you can explain to me, I don't understand how, as this pile is getting so large, correct? I mean, it was a significant amount of material,
Yes.
visible by the human eye. I mean, you know, I saw the pile, huge, big. How did anybody from DPW who was going by there every single day not know we had a problem, there was too much material there? I don't understand this.
Okay.
Because your headquarters is kind of down there.
Correct. We were confident that the contractor would be able to, had a viable product out there, that he could sell the material at a profit. And the contractor had worked for us before, completed some successful projects like the Nemo Storm, the dredging of South Benson Marina Channel. So yeah, we kept waiting and waiting and waiting for it to turn around. We thought it was going to happen. It should have happened. It could have happened, but it didn't. So.
It just seems as though at some point in time, even if you guys thought that there was he had a product that he planned on selling and he could sell, he clearly wasn't selling it because the pile just kept getting bigger and bigger.
Well, there was a turnover. You know, it was an evolving pile. Stuff came in, stuff came out. Granted, more stuff came in, and you know, and I use the analogy like, you know, a baseball team in August that's 8 games out. Well, if you have a good baseball team, they could still make up ground and still turn the corner. So they could have and should have did it. It just didn't happen.
Yeah. I'm just telling you, from the naked eye, it looked like we were 30 games out. It looked like that pile was pretty big. I mean,
And-
were there conversations going on, like, what's going on? Like, are you
Well-
planning on selling it?
There were not only conversations with the contractor, a lot of those were, you know, with the neighborhood group involved also.
Okay,
So.
because they started complaining to the first selectman and to you about that.
Correct. It was a between the truck traffic, the noise of the operation, the visual, the dust, it became too much for the neighbors to bear.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing that site, and once again, I think it's coming out pretty good, so hopefully, you know, the end product will be something we're proud of. But, you know, one thing that site did for forever is it gave the town an opportunity or place to dispose of material forever. It was, there are projects they got accomplished with material that ended up there, like Penfield Pavilion, that would have cost a couple $100,000 if there wasn't this sink to dump the material into.
Okay, so what you're saying, and I think I've heard Mr. Bartlett say, is that we have material that we need to get rid of. And we were going to need to get rid of that. It was piling up already.
Yeah, and once again, going forward, we'll still have to do that, and we'll do it in a much different and better way.
And how's that being done now?
Now we're running that operation at another part of our yard. Nickel and diming it, keeping on top of it. We couldn't do that forever. We're literally doing it in a travel lane on part of our garage. But we still have material coming in, and we still get it out. So nothing has gone into that site for 18 months, probably 16 months.
So you're kind of putting it together. When we get our own material, you try to put it together and try to sell it, or
Well,
try to
well,
give it away, or
Well,
whatever you have
we
to do.
we pay to get some stuff rid of.
Yes.
We reuse stuff. So far, the last 16 months, we've been able to handle it ourselves outside the gate, which gives me some optimism that, going forward, we could do it ourselves and not create a problem.
Okay. In regards to the catch basins that you mentioned earlier and how you're not doing them right now, and you're going to maybe try to continue that in the fall. So generally in my neighborhood, people are used to seeing the catch basins cleaned out every spring. That's what you're talking about, not cleaning them out right now.
Well, and when I, and correct. So when I say when we get them in an interval,
Yes.
we will still do them, but we just won't do them in May and June.
Yep. You've been before us before and said that there's a federal requirement that we do that, correct?
Sweeping you have to do
Yeah.
at least once a year.
Yeah.
And catch basin cleanings and outlets, one of the things we like to do it, and one of the problems with not doing it is, when it's in a catch basin or at the outlet, it's easy to get. When it starts going 200 feet down a stream in somebody's backyard, that's when, instead of scooping it out from the road, you have to, it's a much harder effort. So yeah, we don't want to neglect it, and we won't neglect it. But that's one of the things that, like I said, we ratchet things forward and then pull
So
back.
the federal
when we have to.
requirement's on sweeping, not on cleaning out catch basins.
I don't, and I think, well, I don't know if there's a federal requirement, but we do have a stormwater management plan
Okay.
for the town.
Okay.
So we do, we are committed to cleaning it, and we're not gonna neglect it.
I just remember you were here before us one year, and I cannot recall whether it was the street cleaning or and maybe it was the street cleaning when we were talking about we have a maybe it was with the street sweepers we were talking about and why we need to do that, because there's a federal requirement, and that's why you guys need to have leased the street cleaners, sweepers in the past, because you needed to get the work done. So maybe that's confusing the two.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any other questions? Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to refer back to the town schedule on the revenue and expenses to clarify that one discussion that we had on the $85,000 on the fund balance contribution shortfall, just to make sure everybody understands that properly. Caitlin and I were both correct. We were just looking at it differently. I love it when both people can be correct.
That never happens, right?
But at the end of fiscal year 17, we did have a shortfall, an integration of a minor amount, a couple of basis points, that would take in the fund balance ratio, which would take $85,000 to, at the end of 17, to have made correct to where we wanted to be. Okay, so that's a fact. The second thing is the fact is what she said, that number could change. What she was meaning by that is, depending upon where we end up this year, if we have big savings in other words, if we come under budget expense-wise this year and still put in the 538, then we wouldn't really need part of the 85.
Yeah.
So when she said it could change, the combination of the two numbers definitely could change depending on where we come
Yes.
up this year.
Okay.
But the 85 is a definitive calculation based upon the June 30, 17 snapshot.
Okay. But we know that number, though, by the first quarter.
We know it when we close. I mean,
So we should probably
I'm going to be
dump-
much
if-
more
if-
sensitive to it this year.
Yeah,
than-
I mean, I guess the question is in future years, maybe we
Yeah.
should just, this way we could talk about what the heck happened
Right.
close to the time it happened, just
Yeah.
dump that number into the first quarter.
I was-
It is, I mean, I'm not,
Yeah.
it's not, it's a de minimis amount, but it's
Right.
just.
I just
whatever.
wanted to make sure that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
No,
why.
I
I didn't
appreciate
even
it.
have to put it on here because no one's brought it up to me. But
Yeah.
you know me, I like to.
No, I know. No, and
everything
I
out
kind
there.
of think I felt you both were in different areas, but we're at the same spot. So thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One last item. The next meeting we have is June 5th. It's scheduled for June 5th. And the question came up to see if it was okay with the board if we move that meeting to June 7th. June 7th is a Thursday. Give you a minute to look at your calendars and see if there's an issue. No issue for you? Any issue? John?
I'm available.
Okay, so we'd like to move our next regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Finance from June 5th to June 7th. Yes. All those in favor? Tim, you're in favor too?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, any other items? Very good. Motion to adjourn? Mr. Matola, second by Mr. Walsh. All those in favor? Okay, we're done. Thank you.